Uncle Hanzi explains the origins of Chinese characters. Dissecting and analyzing a Chinese character. Every part of every Chinese character is ultimately derived from a pictograph. If you know the original character components, the original character pronunciation and meaning, and how it has evolved, then every Chinese character is logical. If not, then you are on the long path of blind memorization. Following is a discussion of how you find the original form and meaning of a Chinese character. Steps to analyze Chinese character. We want to start from the present and work backward. That means we start with simplified characters. What is the relation between the simplified character and the traditional character or characters? A simplified character may have more than one related traditional character. For example, B031, Fa, has two characters that map to one character. We must first choose which traditional character we want to analyze. Or, in order to get the whole story, you may want to analyze both. Fa means to shoot, but Fa means hair. You will want to ask two questions. Who made the rule? What government organization made the rule and where is it documented? I did a video on this. What was the logic in order to get the simplified character? The transition between a traditional character and its simplified character is frequently not something you can figure out by yourself. In the case of B072, Luo, it is a redesign of the character, substituting different logical parts. In the case of A073, Ge, it is a substitution of a totally different character. In the case of B031, Fa, and the character Fa, it is unlikely you would ever guess how it was derived unless you had studied the rules of supercursive Chinese. There is a logic to all the simplification mechanisms, but it is in many cases almost lost to history. Once you have the traditional character, it is almost always a case of tracing the character back one small step at a time until you get the original form and the original logic. What do I mean by the same character? As we trace a character back, we should be able to find incremental changes to the character and the components should not change. Bao, the traditional character meaning newspaper, and Bao meaning newspaper are the same character. On careful inspection, it should be clear that Xing comes from a quickly drawn, mistaken form of handcuffs, Nie. Nie is the original semantic component, and Xing is a mistaken form which I call a remnant. Ge means one of, and Ge means one of. They are pronounced exactly the same and mean exactly the same, but the logic of the components is different, and one cannot be accidentally turned into the other. The ren in the first character indicates that it applies to counting people. The zhu in the second character indicates that it is a kind of like a section of bamboo. How has the character meaning logically evolved from the original meaning? Dian had the original components rain and lightning, shen. It evolved from lightning to electricity to electric brain, diannao, which is the Chinese word for computer. If the meaning has evolved, explain how it evolved and what was the original meaning, pronunciation, and logic. It should be clear to most people how we got from lightning to electronic brain. Is the character a phonetic borrowing? In this case, we must explain the character according to its original meaning. Yo originally meant a right hand, but now it means also. It was borrowed only for its pronunciation. There is no other logical connection. If it is a phonetic borrowing, you need to explain the original meaning in order to understand the original character. Find the original character with its logical components. What are the logical components? If they make sense, explain them. If not, trace the current traditional character back to older traditional forms. Trace it back to the seal characters, then to the bronze characters, then to the oracle characters if possible. If it is a newer character, then explain the relationship between the components and then trace the components back to their original forms. Explain the original logical relationship between the components. You are not finished until you have explained the meaning of any phonetics. Now you have all the earliest known pictographs of each of the components. Explain each component. Does it look like what it is supposed to be? If not, then further research may be necessary. The 6 traditional character types, Liu Shu. In traditional Chinese thought, there are supposed to be 6 character types. I will discuss them here because every Chinese knows about them, but they are much too simple for discussing the real etymology of a modern Chinese character. Xiangxing means simple pictograph. This type of character was supposed to be a simple pictograph of something like a dog. Problem 1. Modern characters are so far removed from the original pictographs that almost nothing is recognizable as a pictograph without going through multiple steps of evolution. Quan, which means dog, ultimately comes from a pictograph of a dog, but only after many changes. Problem 2. Modern characters have some basic components that appear as components in other characters, but they may not be from a single original pictograph. Xian is a component in many characters, but it itself comes from a compound character. Zhi shi is originally translated as indicative symbol. It is like the line on top of tian, which means sky or heaven. It is just a line, but when placed above da, which means man, it indicates the sky. Hui yi means compound ideograph. It consists of 2 or more components that, when combined, indicate the meaning. Xingsheng means semantic phonetic compound. These characters consist of one component that indicates meaning and a second component that indicates pronunciation. Zhuanju means derived meaning. Dian originally meant lightning, derived from rain and lightning. Dian shi means electric view or TV. It is easy enough in this case to see how it is derived from lightning. But if the history or cultural context is not there, it may be difficult or impossible to differentiate from the next type. Jiajie means borrowed. It is when a character is borrowed for its phonetic value to mean something else. Yong originally meant to swim, but was borrowed because of its pronunciation to mean forever. Character components and pronunciation. We assume that 1. Every Chinese character can be traced back to an original form, the way it looked when it was first invented. 2. Every original character is assumed to have been formed of logical components in a logical way. When looking at modern characters, there may be huge changes in the original character and its components. Changes in pronunciation. Which means sun, is the phonetic in ni, which means weak. It may be hard to believe, but we can prove it. This is an example of how the pronunciation of the phonetic and the pronunciation of the character may change dramatically over time and make it hard to determine what the actual phonetic is. Changes in meaning. Do means bean, but originally it comes from a pictograph of an ancient ritual vessel called a do. It is borrowed for its pronunciation to mean bean because it was hard to draw a picture of a bean. This is just one kind of change in meaning. The question when looking at a Chinese character is, what was its original pictograph and what was its original logic? Changes in appearance. Quan means dog. It does not look like a dog at all, but we can establish that it does come step by step from a pictograph of a dog. This character has really huge changes from its original form. Most characters, once you know what kind of pictograph it comes from, it will be much easier to remember how to write it. This character may be an exception. We will want to ask, what was the original meaning of the character and how did that meaning evolve into its current meaning? There are 3 kinds of components you may find in a character: semantic components, phonetic components, and remnant components. Semantic components. Is the component a semantic component? In order to find out if something is a semantic component, it must have a meaning related to the meaning of the character. Does the component relate to the meaning of the character? If so, how? It may not be obvious to a modern person how qian, which means to sign your name, relates to bamboo, which you see on the top, until you remember that the ancients wrote on bamboo slats. Is it in the usual position for a semantic component? It is highly likely that yu, which means jade, is a semantic component if it is on the left-hand side. Ma nao means agate. Is the character a productive semantic component? If you know of other characters that have the same semantic component, it is easier to see how it may be a semantic component in the character you are analyzing. Compare characters with the same semantic component. Ju, bamboo, is the semantic component in qian, which means to sign your name. There are many other characters with ju, bamboo as a component. Phonetic components. About 80% of modern Chinese characters are semantic phonetic compounds, where one component represents the meaning and another component represents the sound. I have found 6,000 of these compounds out of 8,000 characters, with 1,500 phonetics ranging from 29 characters per phonetic to 1 character per phonetic. Yang means willow, from tree, mu on the left, and the phonetic sundial, yang, on the right. This is an example of a perfect semantic phonetic compound. The tree is in the usual place on the left and indicates something about the meaning. The phonetic, in this case, is exactly the same as the character pronunciation and has nothing to do with the meaning. This is a clear case of a semantic-phonetic compound. Is it really a semantic-phonetic compound? About half of the 6,000 semantic-phonetic compounds fit into the nice pattern like yang. But because many characters are hundreds or thousands of years old, and the character pronunciation may have changed, and the pronunciation of the phonetic may have changed, and the meaning of the character and phonetic may have changed, many semantic-phonetic compounds are not easy to recognize and may even require some evidence to prove that they are in fact semantic-phonetic compounds. To see if a component is a phonetic, we may have to check the pronunciation today, check how it is pronounced in different dialects and languages, check how it is pronounced in different characters, or check how it was pronounced in different times in history. Is it a natural phonetic shift? In many characters, the phonetic is not the same as the pronunciation of the character, but it is clear that it is close and no doubt is an actual phonetic. Tu, which means dirt, is the component in du, which means stomach. That suggests how to pronounce the character. In this case, the relation is pretty clear. I call it a natural phonetic shift because the T sound is very close to the D sound, t, d. Check other dialects. One way to check if something might be a phonetic is to look at other dialects. Ni means feeble, from person, ren, and phonetic boy-child, It does not seem that and ni are related, but if we look at other dialects, we find that which means two in Mandarin, goes to ni in Japanese, and nung in Mingnan dialect and yi in Cantonese. Check similar characters. We can also find characters like ni, which means to look askance at. If we find that is pronounced ni in ni, which means to look askance at, then it is also probably pronounced ni in ni, which means feeble. So we can conclude that ni is in fact a natural phonetic shift. Is the phonetic in ni. Is it from a different original pronunciation? Shouwen says that xiao, meaning small, is a phonetic in miao, which means a beard of corn, and miao, which means small. How can that be? I believe that xiao originally had two pronunciations, xiao and miao, kind of like having the same symbol and being able to pronounce it as little or small. The miao pronunciation was later modified by adding a mu, which means I. But in other characters like miao, a beard of corn, it could be considered as either a reduced phonetic or as one of two phonetics which can result from xiao. Is it a reduced phonetic? Zhou means table, from mu, meaning wood, and the reduced phonetic zhou, meaning lofty. Note how the phonetic gets simplified. The Shouwen frequently mentions reduced phonetics, sheng sheng, meaning reduced phonetic. As an example, the Shouwen explains the character han, which is the name of a river, as Cong Shui Nan Sheng Sheng, which means from water, and nan, meaning difficult, which is a reduced phonetic. Is the apparent phonetic actually the original character? Jing means the warp of a loom. The warp or woof are the threads of a loom that go up and down, or from front to back on the loom. These threads are difficult to load onto the loom, but you must warp these threads onto the loom before you can start to weave. This process is called warping the loom. The original character for the warp of a loom is jing. In the ancient character, you can see the threads going up and down. It is a pictograph of the warp strings of a loom, and mi, which means thread, is a modifier placed there later. In many cases, the original character may have changed its meaning, so they added a semantic component to remind people that they were talking about the original meaning. Does a phonetic have a related meaning? Fun means dust or flour, from rice, mi, and the phonetic meaning to cut, fun. But fun, which means to cut apart, also has a related meaning. The relation is that flour, fun, is like a bunch of rice, mi, cut, fun, into very tiny pieces. It is often difficult to determine if the perceived related meaning is intentional or imaginary. Sometimes it is very clear, sometimes it may be a figment of the imagination. Ban means partner. The ban is a phonetic, but it also has the related meaning of one half. There are many characters where the phonetic is not just a phonetic, but also has a related meaning. Is it referenced in dictionaries as a phonetic? The most ancient text where we get information about phonetics is the Showan. We cannot just disregard it if it does not look right. Shushan must have had some reason for thinking it was a phonetic, if he says it is. Yo means to have, from the remnant yue, from ribs, row, and the remnant jo, from the right hand, yo. It is no doubt that yo is not only a semantic component, but also a phonetic component. Showan says it is. Is it a phonetic borrowing? There is another kind of character called a phonetic borrowing. Do was originally a ritual object, a bronze container, pronounced do, but it was borrowed to mean bean, also pronounced do. Yo comes from a pictograph of a right hand, but in its modern standalone form, it does not mean right hand. It means and or also. It is borrowed for its pronunciation to mean something entirely different. This is often the case with basic pictographs. Is it a special case phonetic? Ge means older brother, but we usually say gege to mean older brother. Ke, meaning to chant, is pronounced like ge, and there are two of them, gege. This is a special case, but it is clear that the logic was to have two phonetics, ke. Beng is another special case. It means no need to. It is a special case where a single character is formed from the combination of two characters that are slurred together into one syllable. Bu means not, and yong means use or need. Compare characters with the same phonetic component. This will tell you the range of pronunciations with this phonetic and also may indicate if it's a phonetic or not. Is the component a productive phonetic? Is the component used as a phonetic in other characters? If so, how many characters does it produce? If the component is used as a phonetic in other characters, it may be evidence that it is also a phonetic in the character you are studying. Is the phonetic in the usual place for a phonetic. If you have a yue on the left-hand side, the thing on the right is almost always a phonetic. Remnant components. The first thing we want to do when analyzing a character is to break it into its component parts and then decipher what those components are and what was the original logic. In the majority of characters, we can look at the modern characters and break them into two or more logical components. But sometimes a character has been distorted over the years, and we cannot recognize the proper component parts without looking at a more ancient character. Is it a simple modern remnant? Yu means fish. It does not look like a fish, but if you trace the character back to its original form, it looks like a simple object, a fish. Is it a compound modern component? Shen has the basic meaning of first or before. It is a single modern component, but if we trace it back, it is actually derived from two components. Is the component a mutation or remnant, 訛变? Many modern characters have parts that are not logical. In du, which means stomach, you have what appears to be a moon, yue, on the left. It actually comes from meat, rou. Are there similar mutations? The farmer's opinion. Character etymology is not like quantum mechanics. Sometimes a simple farmer may have more insight into the ancient conditions than a college professor. Have an open mind. In many cases, I have discovered the real meaning of a character by watching the everyday lives of simple country people. There are thousands of characters, and you'll never know them all. Sometimes you will be sure you had the correct analysis, only to find out that there is a more believable explanation. The bottom line is, though, that none of us were there in the ancient times. It is only a preponderance of the evidence. Thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone who helped me. Valuable comments are always welcome.